Before we get into today's episode, I'd like to introduce our sponsor, Jane, a clinic management software and EMR with a human touch. Whether you're switching your software or going paperless for the first time, the Jane team knows that onboarding can feel a bit overwhelming. That's why with Jane, you don't just get a software, you get a whole team. Included in every Jane subscription is their award-winning customer support, available by phone, email, and chat whenever you need it, even Saturdays. You can also book a free account, set up a consultation to review your account and ensure you feel confident about going live. And if you like some extra advice along the way, you can tap into a lovely community of practitioners, clinic owners, and front desk staff through Jane's community Facebook group. If you're interested in making the switch to Jane, head to jane.app/switch to book a one-on-one demo with a member of their support team. And don't forget to mention my code CardioPalm1MO at the time of sign up for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Thanks again, Jane. All right, welcome. It is Friday evening. This is maybe one of the latest times I have tried to record a podcast for the week, but I had something else planned for earlier in the week. It fell through for this round. It's going to happen in the future. And I just haven't had a chance to sit down and do a recording. So I've had a couple of things. I have a running list going. And one of the things I've had on my list for quite some time, well, actually, since our most recent COVID adventure this year, I want to talk about how to avoid COVID in the home. Now, here's the thing. I knew that the CDC was about to change their recommendation, and I didn't get any alert that it had just happened. So I actually quickly took a peek before starting this podcast, and it has officially changed as of March 1st. So there are many feelings happening about that change, some good, some bad. But I was hesitant to actually do this recording, this podcast. But I've actually had a number of people in the recent few weeks get COVID, and they typically ask me a couple of questions. So I'm going to share it with you. If this doesn't serve you, that's 100% fine. Feel free, to check out and leave and go check out another podcast. But I think we have all been in the situation where COVID is in the house and you're trying to avoid it. So this just recently happened to us. So first of all, I got COVID September 2022. We were on vacation in Colorado. We came back. I had a high stress event occur in life. And literally we were in the store and I was standing in Lowe's. And I literally looked at Nikki and I was like, I'm going to the car right now. I knew that I had it. My heart rate was 130, standing up, doing nothing. And I had that immediate feeling. So as soon as Nikki got in the car, I told her to put on a mask. I lowered the windows and we went home, tested, and was positive. So that was not this past fall, the fall before. Nikki has not had COVID yet. So she officially went 4 years without getting it. I was convinced that she couldn't get it. Also, most of her family members never got it until this year. So I don't know if there's a different strain, if it's just circumstance, if the odds just finally caught up. I have no idea. But we were sick in the beginning of January and we were testing negative. And I was convinced that it was probably COVID because we were down. But we were testing negative. And so here's the thing with testing: as the strain continues to mutate, there is more test evasion if the tests are not being updated to the new strains. So, there's that piece of uncertainty. But there's also a ton of things going around: flu, RSV, strep, bronchitis, some random plagues that people are getting and they have no idea what it is. And what I'm seeing from people around me who have kids who are, constantly getting sick, or this is the third illness this winter. um, people aren't testing, not just like home testing. You go to the physician and they're not testing. Um, which I don't, I have some feelings that it's not really what I want to talk about today. So I'm not going to go into that. But this happened. Nikki got sick. I think it was this past August. And she actually went to the doctor and they didn't test anything. They didn't test her for strep. They didn't test her for RSV. They didn't test her for COVID. And I was like, so what happened when you actually went to this appointment? Right. So I have a lot of mixed feelings on the thing. Anyway, that's not really the point. The point is, we were sick the first week in January. And then I was at work on a Saturday and we had a birthday party for my niece that I missed most of. And then I met them after for dinner. And we came home, sat on the couch. Nikki looked at me and she said, I don't feel good. Feel my head. So I felt her head. She felt fine. And I kid you not, within 5 minutes of time, she was burning hot. So we were about a week and a half out from COVID. We were a week and a half out from CSM, give or take. And we had that oh shit moment. So, oh shit, if this is COVID, Nikki will be fine because she'll be out of isolation and even past the additional 5 days at that point. But if I get it, I might not be. And I'm presenting at CSM. So this is kind of where this conversation came from. So Nikki's like, I'm going to separate. And I was thinking, I don't think it's COVID. Like, you haven't gotten COVID this whole time. But I'm glad she dug her heels in on it because it was COVID. So we got her all set up. We masked up, got her figured out. We actually have a bedroom set up in our basement due to all the DIY. And so we have like a legit separation, which sucks. Like if you are really trying to avoid it in your own home, it sucks. And it depends on how much space you have to avoid. And so I have some thoughts on this. So first of all, you have to sleep separate, right? Like there has to be full separation. The person who has COVID needs to keep the door closed. I recommend that the person who has COVID has access to their own bathroom. So for instance, if you have a master bedroom and that's the only place in the house or apartment that the person could literally stay in one room and move from the bedroom to the bathroom without having to navigate in the home, that is your best action, if at all possible. If that isn't possible, and for instance, you're in an apartment, then anytime the person with COVID leaves their room, they should be in a high quality mask. So let's just like talk high quality masks. I'm not talking cloth masks. I'm not even talking level 1 surgical mask. I'm talking either a KN95 or an N95. So if you are someone who can't get COVID, if you're someone who is trying to avoid COVID, if you're someone who is caring maybe for an older parent and you're trying to avoid getting COVID, I recommend that you have an N95, preferably one that's fit tested to you. But if you're not in healthcare, you won't know which one is, but that it has a true fit, a true seal. At minimum, I'm talking KN95. And so the reason is that it is considered airborne. And so it is a smaller particulate. And if you are working with someone or assisting someone within however many feet, even if like you're face to face, then you should be in a true mask. But if the person with COVID has to navigate around the house at any time, they should be in at least a KN95. And the KN95s are typically well fitted. and they're a little bit more comfortable than an N95. But then also the person who does not have COVID has to sort of be aware of that space too. How long has it been since they passed through that space? So, what are some things that you can do to avoid it? Right. So, first of all, that moment where symptoms occur, separate. And that means closed doors, separate rooms, separate floors, whatever your situation might be. If you are interacting, like I treated Nikki while she was sick. I came down, I gave her tea, I did airway clearance on her, I worked with her with breathing exercises. I put on an N95 and had eyewear on to do that. When I was just delivering stuff to her when needed, I didn't have eye protection on. But when I was actively doing breathing exercises and airway clearance techniques, I did. So number one, separate. Number two, high quality mask. And I'm talking N95 or KN95. Prior to March 1st, the recommendation was to isolate for 5 days. So for 5 days, that person is not leaving their space. And if they are leaving their space, they're in a high quality mask. For those 5 days, if you are interacting with a person with COVID, you are in a high quality mask. Again, KN95 or N95. Try avoiding using the same things. Anything that she used went straight into the dishwasher. Eating has to be separated. I know this was a question for a lot of people because it sucks, right? Like it sucks being in the same house and not being able to interact with your person that is sick. It sucks on so many levels. So let me just tell you that I understand that. This is how you avoid it. But the question I get asked a lot is can we eat in the same room? I wouldn't. If the person has COVID, they are active COVID, they're in that really early phase of COVID, I'm going to say 5 days. I'm going to stick to the old guideline for a second. I would not be eating in the same room. Could you eat outside together? Maybe. I would say you'd have to be a good distance apart and greater than 6 feet. I would say personally, I would aim for 10, especially if the person is still actively coughing and such. But it also depends on what's the weather, right? So you're in luck if it's spring or summertime and you can actually be outside. I think we had 1 or 2 days that was actually decent that we could sit on the patio, which was nice. And so we did, right? We stayed separate and we were able to interact and eat separately. But that was, I think, around day 4, 5, 7, something in that later time period. It wasn't the first 2 days. Is this a guarantee? No, it's not a guarantee. So what really sucks is if you do all this work and you still get it, then it really sucks, right? Because you tried to do everything right. You tried to separate, you tried to wear a mask, you didn't interact and then you still get it. It really depends on the exposure prior to the symptoms and the day of symptoms. So they're still saying you're most contagious 1 to 2 days before your symptoms and then 1 to 2 days after your symptoms. That is your highest shed rate. That is the highest contagious point. So you don't have control in the moments where the person isn't symptomatic yet. So that makes it a little bit tricky overall. I don't know. Anything else? What about kids, right? So I hear it a lot for parents. Are you going to wear a mask around your kids? Honestly, it depends on what your level of risk is personally, as well as can you afford to get COVID again, right? They just changed the guidelines, and I'm not going to go into the specifics of it. They're trying to take away isolation, and I understand all the reasons why. Taking off from work 5 days if you are actively positive, it feels like an eternity and absolutely sucks. But at least there's, like, structure to it. Now it has to do more about, like, if you feel better. That's, like, dicey for me because I can tell you how many people I know who recently have had COVID, and they still feel like absolute garbage at day 5. So and are actively symptomatic, which plays a whole nother piece to this, right? Like, if you're actively coughing and you're actively sneezing and you are actively feeling like trash, what does that mean in return to work, return to school, like, if you don't feel better? So, I think, the taking away the numbers, like, I get it, but also I think it's gonna leave a lot of gray that is gonna be difficult to navigate. So if you do have a young kid, like, are you testing? I know a lot of, infants, toddlers, number 1, it's hard to test for COVID, like, it absolutely sucks. Are you putting your kid through that? Do you just assume it? All of the things. Could you, in theory, mask during the time that they have a fever, actively coughing, all of it? Yeah, you could. It would suck. It would 100% suck, but could you do it? Yeah. So, I mean, this might not be a great advice, but it is doable. It just is, you know, how patient can you be? Can you separate for 5 days? Can you wear an N95 for 5 days when you are intimately interacting? Because from the kid's perspective, right, if we stay on that piece, the kid isn't masking, right? So the kid is in the house and then the adults would be masking. It gets a little dicey at that point, right? Like, how are you eating? How could you do it? You would feed the kid first, and then maybe the other parent takes the kid to play, and then one parent eats and then swap. Like, yes, I get it. I understand that my recommendation here is like, Rachel, that sounds absurd. Like, I'll just get it. It's your prerogative. The point of this is really to understand or to talk about, like, how could you avoid it if you had to? Like, I did not want to get COVID. I don't want to get COVID, period. But, like, what would I have done if I got COVID? The Wednesday, Thursday, Friday before CSM, I would have had to cancel my trip. I would have had to maybe change my flight and fly in on Saturday or maybe Zoom in. Like, all of the possibilities were not good. So, my number one goal was to avoid getting it. So, separating, masking, washing. As soon as I had Nikki, like, in a different area, the bleach came out, okay? The countertops, the handles, the light switches, the toilet flushy deal, all of the things. We use separate bathrooms until literally we left for CSM because it was, like, right up until we were leaving that she officially came off all of precautions. Yeah, it sucks, man. I mean, cooking dinner by yourself instead of having, like, a second pair of hands, someone to help you prep, I mean, all of the things. Um, Trying to see if I have anything else on my list. So, no guarantee. It sucks, like, all of it. It sucks. I know people right now, this most recent strand hit people hard again. So even though, death from COVID has gone down, it takes a toll on your body. And I don't think we truly understand the extent of all of the things that have changed post COVID in people's bodies. outside of long COVID. And then there's long COVID and how long it lasts. And do people know how to treat it? Which I'm going to do a podcast on that. I've done it on other people's podcasts, but I don't think I've talked about long COVID here. So I don't know. I think I was all over the place. The CDC guidelines threw me off before I came into this. But is it avoidable? Maybe. Is it an absolute giant pain in the rear to avoid it? Yes. Yes, it is. 1,000%. Does it suck even more if you get it and you try to do everything to avoid it? 1,000,000%. Really, it comes down to separation and high quality mask. And high quality to me means N95 or KN95. So, that sucks. It really does. But if you're in healthcare and you're treating patients with COVID, you're doing this, right? Like you're wearing an N95, you're wearing eyewear. Why would I do it with patients in the hospital and not with my own wife? You could look at that either way, right? Also, I just want to throw one more thing in here. If you are living in a house where COVID exists, this is my own personal opinion, like decrease your activity in the outside world or wear a mask while you're out doing grocery shopping, working, school, whatever it is. It sucks, but in my opinion, I would rather prevent spreading to somebody else and like just spreading the love all around. But I'm sure people can argue against that if you're asymptomatic. I think this is going to be an ongoing battle for a long time. So, we're still in it. It's still here. I think it's going to be a problem for a long time. And I'm just really hoping that there's more guidance on what to do when you actually have COVID, because we haven't really talked about that either. And quite frankly, unless you're doing things to treat it, people don't know what to do. So, like the things that I do with my COVID and long COVID patients, people aren't doing. So you get sent home or you're home just dealing with it, riding the storm, and you're like, I feel like garbage. Is there anything I can do to help? And the answer is yes. So we'll talk about that some more too. All right. I don't know if this went the way I wanted it to go. Hopefully it was helpful. If you're in it and you're dealing with it right now and you're like, well, what's your recommendation? I bought Halyard N95 off of Amazon. I can put the link below. And I use KN95 from a company called Hope Supply. They are FDA approved, which was like a big thing in the beginning where, you didn't know the quality of what mask you're getting. I mean, I guess you still don't know for sure. But that's what I've been wearing and still wear even when I'm treating. So, hopefully that's helpful. I'll put those links below if you're interested, if you need something. Do understand that if you're not fit tested for the N95 that you're using, there is increased risk, but it is going to be a much better seal than any other mask. So risk benefit ratio, I would at least go for it. Okay. I think that's all I have for you today. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and whatever you have to do, get after it.